Welcome to the Level Up Report. This week, I want to talk about artificial versus actual difficulty. So, what I mean by artificial difficulty is when you find in games, you'll find different difficulty names, whatever they want to call it. But usually, what I equal this to is they just change the numbers around. So, they change like enemy damage or enemy health. And I don't feel like that's actual difficulty because all you're doing is tweaking numbers. What I mean by actual difficulty is if they're changing tactics or changing enemy placement, anything like that. So what do you think?
Oh, okay. So I got the definition. I got your meaning. So yeah, totally agree with like how they make games more harder is not that appropriate. I feel like it's a lazy way,
That's what I
to do
wanted to say
things.
about it.
But I also have to understand the perspective as well. It saves money. It's easier
It
to
does save
program.
money. I get
Mhm.
where like why they would just simply tweak numbers around, like make enemies hit harder or anything like that.
And a really good example would be Division One when we were playing the game. Like you have all these different settings, like from normal hard, to actually challenging, heroic. You just see more enemies popping out. Like you
Right.
said, they hit harder. They could kill you
They
faster.
hit harder. There's a higher like average of like enemies. So say in Division 1 or Division 2, when you keep bumping up the difficulties, you'll see more higher tiered enemies, like golden enemies that have a lot more health and armor. They'll just keep
hmm
adding more of those.
Yeah, and I mean, it doesn't, and they use the same tactics, the same routine that's been coded inside their system. So it doesn't really make things more interesting, It's just more
No.
of a task. One thing that Vision 2 did brilliantly that's different is once you get past like certain level, right? Uh, tier, right? A new faction comes in, and that faction could be the real actual higher level difficulty. They use the same map, but it's a different type of people, different enemies types.
I consider that actual difficulty because they introduced a completely new faction you've never played before. And it's
hmm
only if you beat the game.
Yeah.
You're not going to see them at all during the game. And it ties into the story too, which I thought was really nice. And it was a breath of fresh air that kept me going after I
hmm
played it because we were playing three different factions. And then all of a sudden, and after that, it's like, okay, there's this new mercenary faction that just comes out of nowhere that starts taking over what you gained in the campaign. And now you have to fight to get it back because they took everything while you were relaxing and thought you finished it story wise, which I thought was fantastic.
Yeah. So I want to see more of that, in future like games and stuff like that, instead of the artificial difficulty, more of these true actual difficulty.
I just wish that what companies would actually add something to it so you feel rewarded that okay, I'm going to bump up the difficulty. I want a challenge. And you'll actually get a challenge. Maybe you'll get some new enemies you've never seen before in like the harder difficulties. Say, okay, you think you're the hot stuff? Prove it. It's like you're gonna see different things that people on normal and easy difficulties they won't see it.
Okay.
Just to give it like incentives, just to give
hmm
you a reason to want to play a harder tier of difficulty.
hmm Well, I mean, the developers doesn't have to go as far as creating all these new enemies.
No, you don't have to do that.
They just could maybe program tactics like
Yeah,
they
maybe
do
their
this
tactics
thing.
change.
They use different weaponry,
Mm-hmm.
um, something small like that. I feel like maybe that's less work.
Yeah,
Don't quote me. I don't know because I'm not a developer. I'm just gonna guess that it should be more less work than create something completely new. And like
yeah, a little
I
extra
feel
effort would be
like
nice.
yeah, and I feel like this is stuff they should be investing in, like investing in their games and this kind of aspect.
If they can't do it at launch, they could add it, post launch. Maybe
Yeah.
they'll add a separate difficulty saying, okay, we took time on this after the game launched, and for anyone that feels they want a new challenge, they could try this new difficulty, and we changed things around, so you're not going to get the same experience when you played first time.
Okay. And like a good example I could think of would be Division One, one version 1.8 when they released that West Pier when they took all three factions and put them together and they fought together. So all
Oh,
these
I didn't
same
know that they actually fought together. That's
they
cool.
fought together. They recycle everything they have, all the codes, and they just put them together and this mashup. So when we were playing the what do you call that? What's that mode? When the enemies, the horde mode, the
The
horde mode.
horde mode?
Yeah, so it's just a mix of all different type of enemies. So you got to change up your actual gameplay tactics. And
Because
like,
now they're mixing matching the different enemy
uh-huh,
types.
exactly. And like this is something they already have already. They just gotta, tweak it around. So they don't have to invest too much time, too much effort to create something really fresh and unique for the players to revisit, the game.
Yeah, I'm. What got me thinking about this is when I was playing through all these Soulsborne games, and you were too, is, it's just learning the enemy or the boss, just their attack patterns. And it's not too hard once you understand what they're capable of, but there is a learning curve. And I always
Hmm.
found those. It's still a difficult game. I know some people say it's not difficult, you just have to memorize, blah, blah, blah. There's still a degree of difficulty because even if you memorize all their attack patterns, you have to execute it. Like, you have to know how to avoid that damage or how to deal with it. It's not as simple as just memorizing.
Okay, so that is true actual difficulty because there's only one difficulty. You can't really change it.
Yeah, I think it's fair. It's just a set difficulty that, okay, this guy is going to do this. You gotta have to learn how to avoid that or how to deal with it.
Hmm.
And it's the same consistent throughout all those games, where it's going to be difficult, but there is a curve that you're constantly growing as the character. You're leveling up, and they keep introducing new enemies and new attacks just to keep it fresh.
Oh, okay. So one good example using a Soulsborne's game will be Bloodborne. So once you reach a certain amount of wisdom, is it wisdom? You know that skull thingy at the corner. What do you call it?
I don't remember what it is, but I
You
know
don't
what you're talking
remember?
about.
Okay, so once you hit a certain level, the attack patterns of some enemies changes, and you start seeing these big creatures on the wall. Like that kind of thing is brilliant, and also because you could also lose those wisdom from the enemies. Some enemy will absorb it, you know,
Hmm.
so you could decrease the difficulty too, and it feels natural, it feels natural.
I didn't actually notice that until someone pointed it out to us when I
So
was
that's
playing
like
for the first time.
and that's another way to do it. You don't have an option to pick difficulty. It just happens.
It just happens if you're like banking on it, you did, or maybe you didn't notice it,
Hmm.
and then yeah, it's seamless. It'll just happen. Yeah, that's a good implementation of adding difficulty to it without not the like making the game too much harder, but
Yeah.
it's still added in because you're doing well. Like, okay, you can handle yourself, doing all right, and then they add these things to it instead of a setting at the beginning of like a screen when before you start the game. Do you want to play it easy, medium, hard, or extreme?
Hmm. And I feel like I think another obstacle that the developers encounters with artificial difficulty versus actual difficulty is when they have PvP in place. It changes the whole game, the balancing. It makes the whole thing harder to like input. So it depends on the game. Single player games are easier to manage to like put extra difficulty.
Yeah.
Most of the multiplayer games they just artificially just make it harder just to like save time, keep it simple, make it easy.
I think it's especially true for loot-based games because it's more of a thing to happen. They just tweak the numbers around and they'll keep adding it more and more, but you get a higher chance for better loot. So
Okay.
there's things like that.
So any final remarks, Ophenius?
No, I just want more game developers to try to challenge the players in different ways besides just tweaking numbers around, because it gets a little boring that I know that okay, they tweak the numbers to be enemies hit maybe 50% harder and they have 25% more health, those kinds of things, which it's not, I'm not saying it's completely lazy, like, however they want to make difficulties is their prerogative, but it would be nice if they added, it could be a separate mode that, like I said, incentivizes the player to want to try those and challenge themselves even more. Because right now, I used to want to play on harder difficulties for the challenge, but then I got tired of it when enemies become bullet sponges and I just spend my time just shooting like that, like hundreds and thousands of bullets into an enemy. And I don't feel rewarded for it because I'm just doing the same thing as I was on any other difficulty, except it takes me less time to do it.
Mm, yep, totally agree.
Yeah, well, that's gonna do it for this week. So thank you guys for listening.